In 1792, the United States Congress passed a law so strict that debasing the nation's currency, lowering its value, was punishable by death. The founders believed that corrupting money was the same as stealing from every citizen who used it. They saw it not as an economic trick, but a moral crime, a betrayal of trust. 2 centuries later, that same act, debasement, inflation, the quiet theft of value, has become official policy. What was once punishable by execution is now called monetary stimulus. This is the story of how the United States turned the crime of inflation into a legal instrument of government. In the late 18th century, money wasn't just a tool of trade. It was a contract, an oath between citizen and state. The founders, shaped by years of war and financial chaos, had seen what happened when that oath was broken. During the Revolution, the Continental Congress printed paper notes to fund the war. Within a few years, they became worthless. Not worth a continental became a national proverb, a warning that dishonest money destroys nations faster than any army. So when America's leaders rebuilt the system, they built it on integrity. The Coinage Act of 1792 defined the dollar not as paper but as metal, 24 grams of pure silver or its equivalent in gold. And the law went further. If any official knowingly debased the currency, he could be executed. It was harsh, but to them, money was trust, and trust was sacred. For a time, the system worked. The young republic had real money, silver and gold circulating freely. But as the country expanded, temptation crept in, wars were expensive, infrastructure cost money, and politicians discovered that issuing promises, paper claims, was far easier than mining silver. By the War of 1812, the U.S. temporarily suspended specie payments, the link between paper and metal. Banks began printing more notes than they could redeem. It was the first quiet violation of that sacred trust. Still, every breach was followed by a return to honesty. The people demanded it. Each panic, each collapse brought calls to restore the standard. Money to most Americans still meant metal. Then came the Civil War, the turning point. In 1861, faced with the enormous cost of preserving the Union, the government did what it once condemned. It printed money from nothing. They were called greenbacks, paper dollars unbacked by gold or silver. They paid soldiers and suppliers, but with each new issue, prices rose. The value of the dollar fell. By 1864, inflation had more than doubled. For the first time since 1792, the United States had officially legalized currency debasement. No longer was it punishable by death. It was necessary for survival. After the war, America faced a choice: return to metal or embrace the new power of paper. The debate tore the nation in two. Farmers and workers wanted inflation, easier money, softer debts. Bankers and creditors demanded a return to gold, hard money, stable value. It was not just an economic argument. It was moral. Was money a promise of value or a tool of policy? In 1873, Congress made a decision that would echo for generations. Quietly, with little public debate, it removed silver from the monetary system. Gold would stand alone. This was the crime of '73. It ended the biometallic system that had balanced the economy since the founding. Silver, the people's money, was gone. Gold, the banker's metal, ruled. The Coinage Act of 1792 had died not with repeal, but with neglect. The foundation of honest money began to crack. The next decades brought booms and busts. 1873, 1893, 1907. Each one revealed the fragility of a system that tried to serve two masters. Gold stability and political convenience. In the midst of crisis, the same question kept returning. Who controls the value of money, the people or the powerful? That question reached its answer in 1913 when Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act. It created a central bank with one extraordinary privilege: the power to expand or contract the supply of money as it saw fit. What had once been forbidden by law to create money from nothing was now enshrined as law. The death penalty for debasement had become a license to inflate. When the Great Depression struck, confidence collapsed again. Banks failed. People hoarded gold and real money as paper promises turned to dust. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt made a fateful decree, Executive Order 61002. It made owning gold illegal for American citizens. They were ordered to surrender their coins and bars to the government in exchange for paper dollars at a fixed rate. Soon after, the government devalued the dollar by 40%. Overnight, every citizen's savings lost nearly half their value. Inflation had been imposed by law. The same act that once defined monetary honesty was now inverted. The state itself became the counterfeiter. After World War II, the world tried to rebuild order. At the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, America proposed a new system. The dollar would be tied to gold at $35 per ounce, and every other currency would tie to the dollar. It looked stable, but beneath the surface, the same problem remained. The supply of dollars kept growing faster than the gold behind them. The US was spending beyond its means, funding wars, welfare, and the post-war boom with newly created money. Foreign nations began to notice. By the 1960s, France under Charles de Gaulle demanded its gold back. Shiploads of bullion left New York for Europe. The trust once again was breaking. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made a short television address. He announced that the United States would temporarily suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. The suspension never ended. For the first time in history, money had no anchor, no metal, no restraint, just promises, and the authority of the state. Inflation, once a moral crime, became the engine of policy. Governments discovered they could fund wars, bailouts, and debt simply by expanding the supply of money. And as the money expanded, its value quietly shrank. Since 1971, the dollar has lost over 95% of its purchasing power. What cost $1 in the era of silver now costs more than 20. The theft that once carried a death sentence has been rebranded as progress. Today, we live in an age where inflation is not a scandal, but a strategy. Central banks openly target it, economists defend it, and citizens are told it's healthy, a sign of growth. But behind the jargon lies an older truth, one the founders understood deeply. When you dilute the value of money, you dilute the trust that holds a nation together. Inflation is not merely an economic phenomenon. It is moral erosion, the slow replacement of honesty with expedience. The Coinage Act of 1792 made currency purity a matter of life and death. Its authors believed that sound money was the foundation of liberty. 2 centuries later, that foundation has been forgotten, replaced by paper, promises, and policy. The death penalty for debasement may be gone, but the crime itself continues, not in secret, but in plain sight, written into law. This is how inflation became legal and how a nation built on honest money learned to live on borrowed time. If this video gave you some value, then don't forget hit like, subscribe and share anyone who like that type of content.